Well, what an amazing story the DesertX model has been for Ducati. We saw a few years ago sort of Ducati decided to give a little bit more off-road capability to their biggest selling Multistrada V4, when they reintroduced that in sort of 2021. There were then rumours of a 21-inch front wheel thing coming, and then sure enough at the EICMA show, this they're called the DesertX Scrambler back then, with an air-cooled motor, arrived, and it just made such a hoo-ha, and it attracted so much attention that Ducati were almost bound to do something about it, right? Talking to some of the design team, they said, shit, they got such a positive response about, the DesertX back there at that EICMA show in 2019 that, the bad thing was they had to do something about it. They had to make the thing. But I think it's been a fairy tale story for them. It's a huge change. Obviously, the DesertX is a model with a 21-inch front and a really dedicated and hugely off-road capable machine from Ducati. But it sort of really reset their focus on off-road, and I just think it's a really amazing story. So look, shortcutting from there, and obviously fitted with the Testastrada 937 L-twin engine. That thing is one of the most loved engines, been around for a long time, but the latest iteration of it, churning out 110 horsepower, found its way into the DesertX, tuned for that model. So let's just talk before you start referring to this amazing machine standing behind me there. Let's just think, what happened to the DesertX? So 21, we saw the thing, it was finally announced and finally revealed to the public. 22, we got our first look at it in Australia. Ducati Australia had launched the thing, and we just got to look and see, couldn't start the thing, but just actually really interesting having a look at the design features and seeing the thing in the flesh. And then sort of around, I think it was about August last year, they launched it to the Aussie market. So, you may have seen some of the stuff that we did, but we were hugely impressed by it, and everything that was about the DesertX on paper, is a very capable, very well sprung, beautifully designed machine, but with this sort of retro styling, this futuristic take on retro styling, mated with cutting edge technology, and people really warmed to it. So long story short is pretty much every DesertX that's landed in Australia has sold, which takes me to I referred to it earlier, the Multistrada V4 had a rally version arrive, and lo and behold, we saw Anton Mio arrive at something and win the twin section and the prologue over there at the midway through last year at Erzberg Rodeo. So the rumours were pretty well founded that there was going to be a rally version of the DesertX arriving, and guess what? And here it is. We're here in Morocco, in the sort of, I guess, you'd sort of say, midwestern or sort of southwestern part of Morocco, just out of Marrakesh in the Agafay Desert. Had the opportunity to come over here with a bunch of journos and test the Ducati's DesertX Rally, which will be out in Australia, I think about February this year, I think in Europe, but in Australia about May. So, what is this thing? We've only had a day on the thing, so look, it's very difficult to say too much about it with conviction, but let's sort of take you through what are the key differences between the standard DesertX, and this beast standing in front of it. And let's sort of start from the bottom. Biggest thing is obviously suspension. So you've gone from a 46mm fork to a 48 closed cartridge. So anyone who's got a Yamaha motocross or enduro bike will be familiar. That's largely the forks in this thing. DLC coating, Cashmere coating. Wow, this is probably, in terms of standard, it's the biggest change I think from the standard DesertX, and in terms of a production fork on a legit mid-capacity travel enduro adventure bike, that is now setting the standard. Same with the shock. There's some upgrades on the shock, going up to a 46mm piston. Let's not get lost in too much detail, trying to keep it top end. But essentially what they've done is raise it for about 20mm at both ends. That gives it from 250 to 280, I think, ground clearance. So what does that do overall? Like in terms of those changes in suspension, that just gives the thing a much more sort of sure-footed, stable, poised, progressive action, when you've got a closed cartridge fork when you're slamming stuff. And the thing was quite incredible. Great also that it doesn't seem to have given up on any of that sort of small bump suppleness. There's some other big changes to the wheels. Ducati did make a big hoo-ha, but there's quite a big change in the hubs at both ends. They did talk about they've moved to like a lighter, stronger hub and XL rim at both ends. And they've moved from the tubeless to the tube. So in spite of adding tubes to both ends, I think they've managed to take about half a kilo out of each end, and that's a lot, because that's made sure that it hasn't lost any of its road manners. And even with the 21-inch front, everyone, if there's one thing people raved about this bike or the standard DesertX, is how it's managed to managed to, you know, perform like something with a 19-inch front on the road, which is pretty special. Other thing, you know, just looking at the bike, obviously it's gone to a sort of a rally-based seat. Interesting that they sort of say that you've gone up to 910, which on paper raises at 15 mil, but just by virtue of the fact that it's so rounded here, you can actually get your feet on the ground probably as well or better. So huge change, the capacity to move, you know, back and forward in the saddle. You know, and it kind of looks like the rally bred beast that it is with that one-piece seat. Pretty cool. The auxiliary tanks, you know, we had them on the demo bike last night. That is an optional extra for an extra 8 litres of fuel, but we didn't run that. And to be fair, it's actually a beautiful looking bike as it is, with those auxiliary tanks on the back. You know, it's sort of, from an aesthetic point, really balanced, and it's really nice. And you know, it takes the 21 litres up to sort of, you know, up to 29, and that'll take your fuel range from sort of 350 to 500 plus, which, you know, is for the serious guys. You know, that could be something you're after. But just sticking on the theme, well, what else is new? It's got the most amazing billet triple clamps on the thing. It's gone from a standard steering damper to this Olin sort of special, mounted up here on the bars, different bar clamps, etc. Interestingly, and really it's just I think a byproduct of going to that bigger fork, is the triple clamp offset's gone from 32 back to 25, but then that offset is offset by the actual pushing out another 10 mil. So essentially the geometry is all the same. A little bit of difference in terms of how this new shock mounts onto the same swing arm, you know. Because the bike's raised, effectively swing arms longer, so to retain that same geometry of the entire chassis, they've changed that a little bit. Old shock won't fit into the bike. Then there's a few other little bits and pieces, like there's the most beautiful billet, rear brake pedal here with a tip that can flip from sort of, from road going to off-road going, which I think should be standard on anything. You can't see it, but over on the gear shifter over here on the same side as well is also an amazing billet unit. The bike comes out with Rally Scorpion STR tyres, which are a bit road going, which is a bit of an unusual contradiction in a little way. The bikes are homologated with those, mainly because, come out of Europe. We've had the rally versions, the more off-road version fitted for this. The only other concessions I think for this is they fitted these kind of extra crash bars, but other than that, the bike is standard. You notice the one thing I haven't spoken about is the engine, and that is because the engine on this Rally model is exactly the same, the exhaust included. And sort of originally I was expecting, it should have, it's going to have a flash exhaust, but I think when you've got a bike that churns out 110 horses, it's got 92 newtons at 6,500 revs, adding power to a bike that is aimed more predominantly at off-road applications is not necessarily what you want. And the electronics on this are super sophisticated. So I guess, on the one other thing I forgot is it's got a forged carbon bash plate, so super strong. We certainly hit some stones and had them deflecting today, so that thing is lighter and stronger. So what do you pay for this? So standard bike I think came out originally, DesertX in Australia came out for about 24.2, I believe. I think I want to say it's 24.7 now. This Rally model that you're looking at in front of me here is best part of 12 grand more than that, 36.2, 36.6, right away out of dealers. So big differential, But I think the really interesting thing, and talking to some of the guys from Ducati last night, is what's this thing positioned? It's not just using the parts I've just identified there to justify that differential in price. It's like, what's it built for? Why'd they make it? And what the guys said really interesting, like the R&D and the marketing guys last night, is when we had a couple of beers over dinner, was like, they don't want this thing to be seen as just a better version of the standard DesertX. And by that they meant, in their minds, the DesertX still is the best combination of sort of, road and off-road, like touring and adventure that you can get. And it obviously does it for a very cost-effective price. Whereas the Rally X isn't a better version of that, but if you're a guy who spends a lot of your time in this sort of terrain, slamming unexpected ruts and stuff at high speeds and really needing that sort of extra safety margin in your suspension, then this bike is it. So, like I said, we've only sort of ridden it a couple hundred Ks today. We're doing the same again tomorrow, heading back in toward Marrakesh. There's a great crew here. It's obviously really cool to see the excitement in all the Ducati crew who, predominantly been road going, design teams, sort of redirecting their energies into off-road and doing a bloody good job of it. This thing was amazingly stable, poised, you know, predictable and easy to ride. You know, it took me a little while to get used to the electronics. That's just a sort of, you know, just a, you know, like a, what do you call it, you know, like user experience, just getting to understand sort of how to navigate your way through the thing. But like, really impressive machine. So as I said, you know, some of the design team are here. We're going to get the opportunity to talk to some of those guys about some of these parts in more detail, just give you a little bit more background. So, you know, we'll have that in a few upcoming articles. So sort of stay tuned for that. And, you know, meanwhile, we're going to get out here, have a bit of more of a crack, muck around with some of the rally settings. You know, there are so many different electronic options on this thing. Just getting your mind around those is something in itself to learn how to best use it and make it user-friendly for you. So, yeah, stay tuned to some of that other content we'll be turning out and over the coming weeks, and I look forward to you know, having a crack on this bike back in Australia at some point.